My name is Leanne, and I am part of the Vancouver Startup Week team. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we're grateful to be virtually gathered on Indigenous land, regardless of where you're joining us from today. At my home here in Vancouver, I am grateful to be on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people. I am privileged to live, work, and play on these lands. First off, I'd like to thank you for joining us for VSW 2021 and welcome to today's session, Using Tools to Supercharge Your Fundraising, hosted by HubSpot for Startups. This session today is part of our VSW Founder Track and is proudly supported by Sage Accounting. Sage knows that you didn't start your business to become an accountant. Sorry to any of you who are watching the session right now. And Sage Accounting keeps your business organized and running smoothly. Track your cash flow, send out invoices, and get paid quickly. Visit the Sage Accounting booth to access free guides and templates to start your business finances today. And if you head there soon, you can get an exclusive VSW discount for when you're ready to switch from Excel. I'd also like to take a moment to thank HubSpot for Startups for being our event partner and also a sponsor for our conference. VSW could not happen without the continuous support of our community of sponsors. With that, I'd like to introduce everyone to our speakers. During the session, as a reminder, please be sure to use the Q&A feature within Whova. That way we can ensure that our speakers get to ask and answer your questions throughout today's presentation. You can upvote on the platform, and without further ado, I'm going to pass the microphone over to our speakers, Madeline Small, and correct me if I say this wrong, I'm so sorry, Mayra Seja?
Myra Seja. Hi there.
Myra
Thank
Seja.
you.
So sorry. Without that, further ado, over to you two to start the session.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that marvelous introduction. So I'm really thrilled to be here. I'm going to share my screen in 2 seconds. All right. So let's see. All right. Hi, everyone. So my name is Myra, and this is Mags. We are here and super excited to talk to you about tools to supercharge your fundraising. In terms of myself, here's a little bit about my background. So I'm currently leading VC partnerships here at HubSpot. Prior to that, I was also in venture capital, where I led over 21 different investments. And I myself have fundraised a lot. So I understand some of the pains of both being on the investor side and then also being a startup. So really excited to share some of that knowledge. And then in terms of fun, I play tennis, I cook, and I also have a podcast. Why don't we hear a little bit about Mags before we jump into our content?
Hi everyone, my name is Magdalene Small, Mags for short. I am a 6-year plus HubSpotter, so I've been at HubSpot for quite a while. Before that, I was an opera singer. I spent most of my tenure at HubSpot on our sales team, so actually working with startups and small businesses to help them evaluate the software, help them implement. I now work on our go-to-market partnership team, and I build partnerships and help startups here in the Southwest. A little bit of background, I'm a Wisconsin native. I currently live in LA. And Myra added some fun stuff, so I will also say I have a small dog. I like hiking. And if anyone is in LA and wants to connect, or broader wants to connect, add me on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/Magdalene-Small. Really excited to be here and speaking with you all today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mags. And so for today, what we're going to cover is a few things. So one, we're going to quickly go over what HubSpot is for those of you who are just joining the session, but we're mainly going to focus on the 3 biggest mistakes people make when fundraising, and specifically around looking at investors, fundraising, and the sales process around metrics and communication. And we're also going to dive into some tools demo to actually get you guys going, hopefully by the end of the session. So the first step is for those of you who aren't familiar with HubSpot, HubSpot is an all-in-one CRM, marketing, sales, and service platform. What we do is we hope to engage your entire buyer's journey, everything from attracting who could be strangers, converting them into potential prospects and turning them into clients, and then ultimately turning those clients into promoters. In addition to an all-in-one software, we have over 500 different integrations with many of the names you guys all work with, like Zoom, Gmail, and a couple of others. We encourage you guys to check that out further. But what's really important is why startups love us. Startups love us because we're very easy to use, easy to get started. Each hub is purchased separately, but then we can also grow with you. At HubSpot, we use our own tools, and we can say that, you know, it served us well when we were a startup, and it serves us now very well when we have over $1 billion in revenue. So in terms of the tools, we'll actually dive into these tools more specifically as to how they can apply to your fundraising process and really help you guys supercharge that experience. But let's start with the first common mistake that many startups make. It's really not thinking about the investor fundraising process as a sales process. I quickly outlined here some of the high-level steps of what it takes to actually get funded. First of all, it starts very simple with actually looking at the first step. It's qualifying your investors, figuring out who is actually going to be your investor. Then you actually put them into your pipeline and start pitching them. You can then move them forward if it seems like a good potential fit for both parties. You move them to that next stage, which is the due diligence phase, then ultimately to legal. Then the fun part comes when the cash hits your bank account. And ultimately, you always want to keep track of who's actually closed when and closed last. And I'll go into a little bit at each step, but really why it's important to actually keep track of these, because not only are they informing your current round, but you also want to be thinking about this as a longer term fundraising process. Remember that anybody who you've spoken to who might not invest in this round might be a potential investor for your next round. So this list is actually very powerful. The connections that you make can be very informative and can also turn into your investors later, or actually may also help you source other investors, even if they don't invest. So it's important not only to keep track of them, have notes about them, but then also revisit them periodically. Now, when we think about a pipeline, it's very similar to when you are sales prospecting. So when you're looking for customers, you want to figure out who's going to be a good fit investor for you. And by this, I mean, typically what you want to look at is investors within your category or industry category. So whether an investor invests in healthcare or does not is an important feature if you're a healthcare startup. For some of you who are in SaaS companies, it's important to figure out if those investors invest in SaaS or only consumer companies, because that narrows down the field and then allows you to actually focus on who's going to be a good fit investor for you. So I highly suggest you look at either Crunchbase, AngelList to really narrow down that list and start off with a pre-qualified list of targeted investors. That's really going to help you save a lot of time. So as you first identify your investors, you then want to be thinking about, okay, so you have this targeted list. How do you actually start turning those investors, potentially strangers, right, into actually some form of communication? And for that, what you want to be doing is figuring out a way to reach out to them. There are two major ways to reach out to investors. One of them is the ideal way, which is a warm referral. And by warm referral, this means if you already have an existing relationship, or if you have some indirect connection, so first degree or second degree of connection to them, where they can go ahead and introduce you. There's a couple of good resources when it comes to referrals. One of them is going to be looking at your LinkedIn and looking, okay, great, we are 1 degree of separation. The second degree is looking at other startups in your community that you're already friends with and seeing, hey, have those investors that I'm targeting, have they invested in some of my friends? Can my friends make some of those introductions? That's the second way when you're thinking about referrals. The other piece is that when you think about cold calling, I want to give people this background that actually COVID changed a lot with cold calling investors. For the most part, in prior years, when you asked an investor, like, what's the best way to get a hold of me, it would be solely through a referral. The last year really made cold calling actually a very approachable and effective way to connect with investors. So whether that means pinging them on LinkedIn, sending them an email by using tools like Hunter.io or a couple others that can help you find email addresses. The key here is to make sure that you've done a little bit of research. Remember, you're only outreaching to those targeted ones, but you want to make sure that you're crafting that message that is tailored to them. It doesn't, You never want it to look like spam or make it look very generic. Hi, investor. Here's my pitch deck. Do you want to invest? You want to take a little bit of time to make sure you tailor and craft those messages. And Mags is going to actually show us how you can automate some of that and really save time so that they do appear more one-on-one conversational pieces. So that's the second piece in terms of getting VC's attention. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, feel free to write them into the chat or into the Q&A, and we'll address those towards the end. The third piece is actually, how do you actually get funded? In order to get funded, I tell all my startups this, is that it's important to run this as a sales process and that every connection is leading to that next stage. So here, one thing that many startups do is that they'll go into the pitch meeting, but not move it forward. I highly recommend that at the end of every pitch meeting, you guys have invested 30 minutes with this investor. You want to say, great investor, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else I may answer before moving this to the next step? Have them say something. That's going to save you a lot of time, but also clarify if there's anything else you need to add during that meeting before moving on to that next step. And if they say, no, you've covered everything, or yes, they might ask a question, you can answer that at that time. But what's important here is once you've asked that question, that clarifying question, you also want to ask that second question, which is, great, what are next steps and can I have a timeline? Do they need to go back to their team? Do they meet on Mondays? This allows you, by setting that date, this is going to then allow you the right timeline for you then to manage the process, set expectations for yourself, and manage multiple of these investor meetings at the same time. So this is partially why we want to be keeping track of them in this pipeline, and then also making sure that we're always asking what are the next steps to move them to that next level. Same thing with the legal review. How long is it going to take? Do you have all the documents you need from me? And then making sure that you're always moving them forward or moving them to close won or close lost. And I want to get everybody a little bit comfortable with this idea of close lost. It's actually 10 times better to get a quick no. Well, I should take a back step. So your best option is always to get that quick yes. But in lieu of that, a quick no can actually save you a lot of time. So you want to make sure that you're asking investors the right questions so that either they're moving forward or they're moving out of your pipeline. This can then help you really make sure that you're streamlining your own time and spending the right time with the right investors. And Mags will later really dive into a little bit more of how you set up the pipeline, but here's a quick snapshot, what it might look like. So now when we think about metrics and what investors are looking for when it comes to metrics, here are a few ones that typically come to mind and where tools and automation can help you. So for the most part, you're going to hear this question of what is your MRR, right? So, or what are your margins? You want to make sure that you have the right tools to then be able to deliver those metrics quickly on your pitch or then at your next meeting. And these are going to be even more and more important as you continue to raise, because if you're starting off at seed and you're going to Series A, there are going to be clear metrics that you need to deliver on in order to raise that next round of funding. So you want to make sure that you're set up with the right tools to then review those. The other common metrics that I see is really around CAC, or the cost of customer acquisition, and also your payback period time. So by payback period, we mean how long does it take for you to recoup any money spent in terms of acquiring that customer. Investors like to know what dollar amount it's going to take for you to invest in, and when are you going to get that back? Does it take 6 months? Does it take a year? Does it take 2 years? So you want to make sure that you have the right tools to start tracking some of this and make it in an automatic way, so that then you're able to report on this periodically to your investors or even your prospective investors. The other one is in terms of making sure that you're always telling a narrative. Not only are these numbers and tracking tools super important for your narrative, but you want to make sure that this threads along with your other activities that you're doing, whether you already have trials, initial customers. For some of you who don't have sales, you can track other things. So you want to get creative. Are you tracking either people in your pipeline, meetings for some of you that are in B2B sales? you're going to have a longer sales cycle. So you want to figure out what are some metrics, what's something that I can track so that I can communicate this with investors, and really focus on the overall narrative of your story around metrics, and then also the opportunity. And I can't see any questions, Mags. Do we have any questions?
I am not seeing any yet, and I'm looking in Whova too, and I'm not seeing any there. But please, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A. We would definitely want to hear your feedback.
Perfect. All right. So why is communication important? Many startups fail to realize that not only do you have to communicate very, very well with your own teams internally, but external communication to your investors is extremely crucial, not only to your existing ones because they've written you checks, but also because you want to be communicating with prospective investors. And here's the piece that most people miss, right? You want to figure out, one, can communications help you get in front of them? And can you also help nurture some of those people that you met 3 months ago? Many startups don't update investors or prospective investors on a monthly basis. I highly encourage you to create some sort of mailing list, and this should be different than your customer list. This is your investor mailing list, and doing something very small, very low lift, where you can update your top investors and saying, hey, we just secured these top customers this month or this quarter, whatever cadence works best for you. But you want to make sure that you have continual touch points, because remember, out of sight, out of mind. And for investors, they are extremely busy. They're looking at several hundreds of startups per year. How are you going to break through some of that noise and make sure that you are staying top of mind? And the other part is that communication can also help you move them towards action. So we mentioned at the beginning, when we were covering this pipeline concept, that you want to make sure that you set up those particular reminders to follow up with those investors at the cadence that they have asked. So for example, if an investor at that meeting told you, hey, I need about a week, or hey, we're still, we're going to need 2 more months, you want to make sure that you set up some tools and some triggers for yourself to manage all of those, and that you're communicating with them in a way that's effective and that meets their expectations. So I think that's all I have for now. I'm going to send it over to Mags. I'm going to stop sharing, and Mags is going to go over some tools.
Okay. So I don't think we can do a hand raise in here because we're in more of a webinar format, but I'm going to try to keep it pretty broad and hopefully talk about things that strategically you could apply to any platform, but we are going to take a look at the HubSpot platform and how you could do this inside of HubSpot. So let me pull up a screen share here. Okay, I'm actually going to switch to this tab. Okay, so before we dive into some HubSpot specific tools, I just want to start by saying, whatever platform you choose to use, I think it is really, really important to pick a CRM system and what's going to be your core database, your source of truth, your source of record early on, and to track all of your outreach on it. Maya brought up some really great points about being able to pull data that investors want to see, and then track your investor outreach in a really similar way to how you would run a sales pipeline. If you're keeping all of these interactions in one place, in one database, it's going to be very easy to operate your business and your database versus going back and saying, okay, well, I've got this one spreadsheet here with all my investor outreach, but I track my sales in this CRM, but we kind of keep some outreach here in this other system, and our mailing list is over here. We want to avoid all of these disparate systems, get everything in one database, have it be extremely data-driven and customizable as you're picking systems. So we're going to walk through some HubSpot stuff here. HubSpot has a free CRM, but as I mentioned, whatever system you pick, make sure it is as streamlined as possible and really user-friendly for you and your team. So as you are thinking about doing investor outreach, one of the great points Myra brought up is that investors want to see specific metrics. So make it easy on yourself, your team, and your business to pull the metrics that investors are going to want to see. HubSpot system makes it really easy to pull reporting. But as you start to think about things that investors might want to see, think about deal-related metrics, business growth-related metrics. You can even pull productivity. And the nice part about the way that you can use HubSpot system specifically is that you can use it to both track your actual business performance, and you can use it to actually track things like productivity and outreach. So if you just wanted to personally track how often you're reaching out to specific investors, maybe how often you're taking different calls, maybe a customer call versus typing out a call with an investor. We can help you to differentiate those two so that you can track all aspects of your business and really get granular about where you're spending your time so that you can understand, hey, we're talking to X amount of investors, we've taken this amount of meetings this month, and this is what it's netted us in terms of actually moving through that pipeline that Myra was talking about. So really easy customizable reporting in here. I think it's important, again, to treat your investor outreach, treat any prospecting you're doing as really kind of sales prospecting. Track it in the same way. Make sure you're monitoring yourself and able to monitor your performance so that you can spend your time where it's most effective. From there, as you think about communicating with your investors, you really want to think about creating that relationship. And as Myra mentioned, even if you take it to close loss, so maybe it's not a fit right now, maybe they could potentially be an investor in a further round, maybe they could potentially refer you customers. Just because maybe it's not a fit at this stage doesn't mean that it's not necessarily a fit down the line. So it's going to be really important to have a historical view of all of the communication you've had with them. We do that inside of HubSpot by integrating with your inbox, Outlook 365 or Gmail. And we integrate with all of the activity that's happening at the contact level. So what I mean by that is, say that you are having conversations with a potential investor, you're emailing back and forth with them, maybe you've taken a meeting with them, you've written some notes about them, hey, we met here, had this conversation in person or something, or just dropping a reminder to yourself. You can also see with HubSpot, if that investor is actually coming back to your website, if they are engaging with your business and your brand, say you had a great meeting, you're like, that went so well, I'm really curious maybe what their thoughts are, you can actually have the system tell you like, oh, hey, an hour past our meeting, it looks like they were back on our website, maybe reading some more about us or looking at some of our product pages, things that are going to help you to understand like, okay, I can gauge their interest and now we can tailor outreach appropriately. The other nice piece is we'll be able to, like I said, give you that full historical picture. So also as you're keeping maybe investors on that type of, monthly newsletter, quarterly updates in terms of here's how the business is growing, here's some customer spotlights we've done, we'll track that all for you right here in one historical 360 view. Then when it gets time to actually build your lists, this is a piece that I see people spending a lot of time on. And this is why I'm very, very bullish about encouraging people to keep all of your contacts and data in one system. People can spend so much time trying to mail merge different lists, pull a list here, find out who attended an event here, get a list from an event here, do some outreach, maybe get a business card. If you have everyone in one system, you can tag them appropriately, and then you can build really easily filtered views that will tell you, for example, hey, this is a top rated investor. This is a high priority lead. They've recently come back to our website. They opened that marketing email I sent. And then you can action from there, whether that action is, okay, I actually maybe want to pick up the phone, give them a dial, touch base with them, connect with them on LinkedIn, or maybe it's, I want to enroll them in a newsletter, or we are going to have, a booth at an upcoming event, something like that, or a spotlight somewhere. All of this is going to help you to segment your database and do more productive, proactive, and targeted personalized outreach. So as we look at pipelines here, I think it is an absolutely great call out to treat your investor outreach as you would a sales pipeline. Inside of HubSpot, you can create up to 25 customizable sales pipelines with our sales professional tools. What that means is that you can literally customize these. I really like the pipeline that Myra showed. If you feel though that you have additional steps in there that you want yourself or your team to be following, you can add those in there. And then the nicest part as well is, say if you are going to move a deal down the pipeline, you can drag and drop it here, but the nicest part is that you can also make sure that you are requiring either yourself or your team to input necessary business information before moving it down the pipeline. Yep. So say that I'm going to take a deal to close lost. I can require myself through the way I've set up the CRM to actually remind myself like, okay, here's why we were closed lost at this point. This piece is extremely, extremely useful, especially when you're going to be maybe going back and looking at previous investors you've spoken with who maybe their reason was that, hey, we really love you, it's just not right now. This is going to help you to organize those and segment those out from the rest of your closed lost. And then again, be more targeted and timely in your outreach. So looking at an actual deal itself, inside of HubSpot here, your deal pipeline really matches your contact record. So nice user interface here. Again, quite customizable. The way I would think this deal piece is it's doing the exact same thing as a contact record. You want all of the historical data on this deal. So just going back to the idea of whether this is a quick yes or quick no, which is what we're shooting for. We're trying to get to one of those yes or no as quick as possible. This is going to show you, say you come back to this 6 months, a year later, or say you have another teammate who you add on to help you in this process. Everyone has access to the same data. Everyone has access to the same historical record, and you can really easily and quickly follow up on what happened previously. So something else to point out here as well. One of the nice pieces that we can do with our deals is we can actually automate things. So I think it was a great call by Myra that you want to try to automate some of your tasks and some of your outreach. Say that you are working on different timelines and someone says, hey, yes, we've just taken this meeting. In order to progress the next steps, we're going to need a week to review. We'll get back to you. You can actually have our system build in automation to remind you to do different activities as deals progress through different phases. So say that you had an awesome investor meeting and it seems that it's stalled out. They told you they would reach back out in a week. You haven't heard from them. It's been 2. Based on how you've marked that deal inside of HubSpot, you can actually have our system just ping you with an email reminder or a task reminder. Hey, maybe it's time to just shoot them a quick email follow-up, ask if there's any other information you could provide, just do a quick, really human touch base, whatever that might be. Our system can help automate. You as founders probably are spending your time in a lot of different places. I think for anyone running a business, really time is of the essence, especially if you're a founder of a startup. So we want to make sure that your time is able to be spent where it's most impactful, not chasing down dropped conversations, not chasing following up leads, things like that. The system can automate quite a lot of that. So thinking a little bit more about automation, as you're actually doing your outreach, we can help you automate your outreach and better track your one-to-one outreach. And this is a piece that I see people miss all the time. They do not apply the same principles of data-driven decisions that they would apply to a marketing email as they do to their one-on-one, either sales or investor outreach. By that, I mean, you would find it very funny if you talk to a marketer and they had never done any type of A/B testing or even thought about what the subject line of their email was. You would assume that if someone's sending a marketing email, they're putting a lot of thought towards, hey, how is my subject line going to get people to open this? What does my copy look like? We can do the same with our sales outreach, with our investor outreach. Anytime you're sending an email, you're asking for someone's attention. So we can help you make sure that as you are crafting these emails, you are paying proper attention to things like subject line, how long the email is, what time your email is getting sent out, and we'll help you report on things like your overall open rate, reply rate, meeting rate, click-through rate, to make sure that as you are taking time to write a great follow-up email, a thank you email for someone's time, maybe you're sending over a pitch deck, that these emails are actually getting opened and getting interacted with in the way that you want as you're taking time to do that communication. So what these look like with our sequences tool is you can actually create custom templates. So really easy to customize these in here. We've got great personalization tokens, things that make it easy to actually write, as Myra alluded to, write an automated-ish email that's actually truly something that's pretty customized, but it goes out automatically. With our sequences tool, you can also string together up to 5 separate emails and put tasks in between. This will help you to do your follow-up. I know I personally suffer from, I get busy, I send an awesome first email, maybe I see, I'm like, oh great, someone opened it. And then, 3 days later, I'm like, actually, did they ever respond to that? I don't think so. Now I have to go manually follow up. If you have people enrolled in sequences, you can do a really great first outreach email. You can even just have the rest of your emails say something like, hey, did you catch my first email? Any other info I need to get you? Any other next steps? Things like that. All of this is completely customizable. You can always manually unenroll someone from a sequence, or they'll be automatically unenrolled when they book time with you or reply to the email itself. Now, in thinking about this investor communication, one of the things I like to keep in mind as you're sending email, as you're asking for people's time, as you're committing to next steps, booking meetings, you want to make it as frictionless as possible to complete those next steps. By that, I mean, I think we've all fallen into the trap of communicating with someone over email, saying, great, when can you meet? And all of a sudden we're going back and forth. We're each proposing time blocks. We can't do that week. That takes time that we could avoid, and it adds friction to the process. What we want to do is use tools like a meetings link, something like HubSpot's meeting tool here, to make it super simple for someone to get on your calendar. So these are customizable inside of HubSpot. You can have group meetings links, which show group availability. You can have an individual meetings link. And basically you can put these into templates, you can put these on your website, you can add these into a live chat, and it will allow you to have people book you in whatever time zone works. This shores up so much of that back and forth communication. And again, is just going to make it look extremely professional when people try to get in touch with you and reduce a lot of that potential friction as you are coordinating a process that has multiple next steps, different meetings, different stakeholders, different people's calendars. One other thing I wanted to mention is as you're putting together sequences, as you're asking for time, as you're sending pitch decks, things like that, you can get creative with the type of email outreach you're doing and the type of follow-up you're doing. Something we've seen work really well is using a tool like Vidyard. This is just one example of video software you can use, but this software natively integrates with our templating, sequencing, and emailing tools. And it's a really awesome way to communicate quick hits of information that are consumable on different individuals' time. So this example right here, this was actually an email that I sent to a partner. They told me they're really swamped, but they needed a refresher. And I was like, great, let me send you, a 2-minute, 5-minute overview. And then if you have questions from there, we can meet. Think about ways that as you're taking someone and going through a process that you can be creative and be unique in the way you deliver information. Video has worked extremely well for us internally. And it's just another way to, if you're doing a quick recap, maybe someone was ill or out of office, missing from a meeting, you can send them quick hits of information that way. Now, as we are thinking about automating, I did want to show HubSpot's workflow tool because I do really believe in using automation on the broader scale. This is where we can get into doing what Myra was talking about, which is keeping your investors on some type of what I would honestly call a drip campaign or a nurture campaign. But ultimately, what you could look at is like consistent updates as to the progress and the milestones that your business is achieving. What we can do is we can set enrollment criteria to basically determine, is this someone who's a part of a certain list? Have they taken a certain action, viewed a certain page, attended an event with us? Whatever it might be, we can set this enrollment criteria here. And then from there, we basically just decide to automate email on a mass scale. Now, where HubSpot gets unique, and again, whatever automation tool you choose, as you look to some of the bigger automation tools, what you want to be looking for are ones that can do this branch logic here. Sorry, my computer's being a little slow. This branch logic here. So what you want is for the tool to be able to push people down different paths based on the actions they are either taking or not taking. HubSpot, we're really big on using behavioral data to trigger actions and to trigger personalized outreach. We find that when you actually use someone's behavioral data, like the information they're giving you, it's going to lead to a much more timely and typically much more personalized and much more effective outreach and touch point. So with automation, as you are asking people, you're sending email, you're inviting to events, you're doing these updates, you can literally set it to say, hey, you know what, if we've sent the past 5 emails and they haven't opened anything, we're going to actually put them on a different list. It's going to be less communication, or we're going to try to be a little more communicative with them. Whatever you think is right for your business, you can really use the information that your investors are giving you as they are following you on social, checking out your website, engaging with your blog, whatever it might be, engaging with your email content. You can use them to keep in these different tracks, and then we can circle it all back around to helping you surface these engagements in your inbox by giving you an email, giving you a task notification when something resurfaces. So the whole point of automation is to keep your outreach really, really timely and personalized without you having to sit there and monitor your entire database on a daily basis. We want to use the system to help you by triggering significant actions that are taken. Lastly, I just wanted to come back one more time to saying that HubSpot has quite a lot of analytic tools. One of the real powers of using a system like this, as I mentioned on the outset, is the ability to run your entire business backend off of this system. By that, I mean marketing, sales, customer service, your actual customer facing side of the business, and your investor outreach. If you have a partner channel that you end up opening, you can run all of this from here. We've got a lot of pre-built reports for you. The whole idea being, again, whatever system you choose, whether it's HubSpot or otherwise, I really believe that data should be in your hands, and you should really be able to make proactive data-driven decisions versus having to be reactive when it comes to doing any type of outreach, especially that communication with investors. So that was everything I had to show you from a tools perspective. I think we've got some ample time here for questions. I'm happy to circle around back to a tool if there was something interesting here that someone would like to look at again, or a different tool inside of HubSpot that we didn't get to focus on yet, or just take any questions in general around strategy and outreach.
Give people a second. If not, I have a few questions.
With that, we'll probably transition to your questions, but just a reminder to everyone, please be sure to post your questions in the chat, in the Q&A. We're watching a few different platforms, but over to you for some of your questions.
Awesome. So Mags, I was actually hoping you could reshare the deal pipeline page. I was going to point out a few other things that are super helpful there.
Absolutely. Let me just flip back to pipeline.
So as Mags is like bringing this up, I wanted to bring up a couple of concepts for people here. So the thing is, one, you probably already have some sort of pipeline tracking system for your sales. The beauty of like how we do it at HubSpot is that you can run multiple pipelines. So you can run your customer pipeline in the same system as you can run your investor pipeline. So I wanted to point that out. And the second piece of it is that startups, the idea of like running a pipeline on like an Excel sheet is not going to serve you well because it won't keep this latest up-to-date thing. When you look at these cards, they're actually very powerful, not only because they're fun to move forward, but also if you look down at this bottom line, this can actually, here is for a sales pipeline, which helps you keep track of how much money is coming in. When you switch about it and think about it from an investor perspective and fundraising, this is the money that is potentially being raised from your total pipeline and investors. This is going to be important because if you have a target of like 1 million, you do know that your pipeline needs to be up higher. And now you can start bringing up some idea of like probability of like what actually is going to be your close rate, and thinking about, okay, if I need $1 million and 3 checks for, let's say, around 350K or whatever that number is. Now you know how big your top funnel pipeline needs to be and start feeding it if it's not moving over and not crossing over. This will now start to allow you to then figure out which parts of the pipeline are you should be focusing on. Is it reaching out to more meetings in that earlier stage of the process? Or do you have a lot of people in this due diligence phase that are simply stuck? This is why the pipeline is really, really helpful as you're thinking about moving your investors forward. And remember that this like closed loss, closed won, the closed won bucket can help you say, great, how much of your goal have you achieved? And this closed loss will then help you put them back into that nurturing campaign that Mags talked about. So that's one thing that I wanted to point out. Any other questions that we see here, or other things that you think, Mags, this conversation has triggered?
The only thing I would say is just connecting it back to automation. I think that's a great call out, but say that you move someone into a closed lost, we as HubSpot could actually automatically have that, add them to a different email marketing list, have them stamped as a certain way, a certain priority, have them enrolled in a workflow. So all these different actions can trigger other actions, meaning that we just make it really easy for you to actually monitor all of this, keep up with all of this. So not a lot of like manual data transfer, which again, whether you use HubSpot or not, this is why you should definitely get off of sheets, because an Excel spreadsheet is not going to allow you that flexibility, or a Google Sheet, that flexibility to really automate your full and like close the loop on these processes, keep people in a nurture as you are taking them through a pipeline processes with you and communicating with them from an outreach perspective.
Thank you, Mags. That's super important. And think about it. You're already doing it for some of your customer base. And if you're not, you should definitely be doing it. But think about taking that same approach, same mentality of closing a pipeline in sales to closing these investors. The other point Mags really pointed out is having a single source of truth for your CRM. I know a lot of you may keep, again, spreadsheets or keep some email threads in your email. You want to be thinking really, really long term with this. When it comes to investors, these relationships last a very long time. Think about not even this startup, but think about your future startups. I know all of you are going to be super successful, but you want to be thinking about those future raises already. For anybody who has just raised a seed round, you want to be thinking about your next round immediately, looking back at any of those connections. You also want to be jotting down personal information. such as anything that's relatable to them. And you will not be able to do that in a spreadsheet, or at least effectively. So things to keep in mind is, right, where are people located now? Where have they moved? Their LinkedIn will not necessarily tell you, but you'll pick up those things while you're communicating them. What's important to them? And above all, making those notes as to what did they say you needed to have done in order to actually get funding from them. That's why it's so important for you to make sure that these notes are all sitting in one place. Additionally, if you have another partner, you want to make sure that this way you guys can divide up and conquer, and you don't have to be a part of every single meeting that the other partner is in or is not, right? Especially those early qualifying meetings or those early demo days. You want to make sure that you're being as efficient as possible with your time.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions there? And for those of you who aren't, who might also be thinking about, like I mentioned earlier on about outreach. So you have your list of that outreach. You want to be doing that as quickly as possible. The other thing, when you have a process and automation around it, is if you have a list of, let's say, 50 targeted investors, you want to do those all together because you actually want that pipeline moving together. That's actually how you're going to get a competitive bid. And that's actually how people fundraise, and they say they're oversubscribed. It's only if you run that pipeline, you run it tight so that you get those offers all around that same time. So that's another reason why I encourage people to really, take a minute, sit down, develop a plan for actually fundraising, and then start executing, because that's how you create FOMO. That's how you create letters that compete with each other. That's how you're going to get your biggest valuation and the most amount of money. It's only if you can pull those investors together around the same time where they're actually giving you term sheets or concurrently. So that's another reason why you really want to be thinking about this as like a tight sales process. The other thing is, like, you want to run it and then you want to put it away so you can get back to your normal business, right? And you're only going to be doing that if you are making sure that it's run really short, tight, and that then you have some automated things for general keep up while you go back to work until the next raise. Any other tips, Mags?
I think that's it. I think that last point was such a great one. And yeah, just make sure you have a system in place that allows you to put that list together, to have all of the information at your fingertips, to build your templates, your sequences, and do your outreach really effectively. I think that's such a good point of wanting them to all drop at the same time. So make sure you are giving yourself a step ahead by having tools in place that will help you.
Wonderful. Well, with that, on behalf of the team, I want to say thank you to both of our speakers. Thank you to all of our attendees. And of course, thank you to HubSpot for Startups for today's session.